Hey, deep divers, ready to explore something really fascinating today?
Always ready to dive in. What have we got?
Well, today we're heading over to Kenya to their crypto scene.
Kenya. Interesting. You don't hear about that every day.
Right, it's actually booming over there. But there's a twist.
Oh, there's always a twist.
Yeah, the government's thinking about clamping down with a whole bunch of regulations.
Huh. So crypto's taking off organically,
Mm.
but the government might step in. Why?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We're going to figure that out today.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So our main source today is this opinion piece from Techspace Africa. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, I've seen their stuff. Pretty prominent tech news site in Africa.
Exactly. And this piece dives deep into this whole crypto situation in Kenya.
So like a good place to start.
So let's just jump right into it. The first thing that blew my mind was that over 4 million Kenyans are already using crypto.
Whoa. Really? That's got to be like, what, 10% of their adult population?
At least. It seems like they're embracing this tech in a big way.
Yeah, that's huge, especially considering it's all happening without any government involvement. So far, at least.
And that's what got me thinking. It reminds me of how successful Kenya was with M-Pesa.
M-Pesa. Oh, yeah. That mobile money system.
Totally. And
Yeah.
that really took off before any heavy regulation came along.
You think there are parallels here?
It makes you wonder, right? Could crypto follow the same path?
Maybe. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we need to unpack those proposed regulations. What are they talking about?
So Kenya's National Treasury is the one pushing for this, and they're proposing a whole wave of new rules.
What kind of rules?
Well, the article calls it a potential flood of red tape and bureaucracy.
Oh, boy. Sounds like fun.
Right, but it looks like they're particularly focused on anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism.
AML and CFT. The classic concerns whenever something new pops up in finance.
Exactly, like a breaking record.
Makes you think, wasn't this the same song and dance we heard with M-Pesa way back when?
You're reading my mind. And what happened? Those fears turned out to be mostly unfounded.
Right. M-Pesa became a model for financial inclusion and security.
So is this just history repeating itself? Same old anxieties just projected onto crypto now.
It's possible.
The article really emphasizes how Kenyans are already using crypto to solve real problems. They actually call out Binance specifically as a good example.
Finance. That's a huge global crypto exchange, right?
Yeah, they've got a pretty big presence in Kenya.
Makes sense. There's obviously a demand for those services there.
And the article points out that they've even partnered with mobile money providers.
Wow. So even Kenyans without traditional bank accounts can get access to crypto.
It seems so. It's almost like policymakers are having these theoretical debates while everyday people are just out there using crypto to meet their needs.
Yeah, sounds like a pretty big disconnect between what's happening on the ground and what the government's trying to do.
Right, and here's another layer to this. It's not just Kenya's government. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, is pushing for stricter regulations too.
The IMF. That's interesting. What's their angle?
On the surface, they're echoing those same concerns about financial crime.
Mm.
But the article digs a little deeper, and it points to a bigger issue. The tension between centralized and decentralized finance.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Crypto, by its very design, is meant to operate outside of those traditional financial systems.
Right, and that seems to rub some of these powerful institutions the wrong way.
So the question becomes, is this really about mitigating risk, or is it about control?
Right. Is it about powerful institutions like the IMF wanting to maintain their grip on the financial system?
It's a good question. And I think it's one we're going to be grappling with more and more as crypto continues to grow.
You're telling me, okay, so we've talked a lot about the potential downsides, but I'm curious what a more nuanced approach would look like in practice.
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as no regulations. There has to be some oversight. You need to protect consumers and the financial system as a whole.
Right, it's about finding that balance, that sweet spot where you're safeguarding things but also giving innovation room to breathe.
Exactly. And it's tough. But the article actually points to a few key principles that could guide a more humble approach to regulation.
Okay, I like where this is going. Hit me with those principles.
One of the most important is education.
Education. You mean like financial literacy?
Exactly. If people understand how crypto works, they can make smarter choices.
That makes sense. Instead of just fearing crypto, Maybe this is the chance for Kenya to actually become a leader in crypto literacy.
Right. Imagine public awareness campaigns that demystify this whole thing, or
Mhm.
even just educational resources tailored to different needs and levels of understanding.
I could even see them working some basic crypto concepts into school curriculums. That would be pretty cool.
Right. Empowering people to not just use crypto, but to understand it.
Okay, I'm sold on the education front. What else is there?
Well, another key principle is fostering open dialogue
Dialogue. Between who?
between policymakers and the crypto industry,
Hmm.
and most importantly, the Kenyan people who are actually using this technology.
So it's about moving away from those top-down decisions.
Yeah. Bring everyone to the table. Let the policymakers hear what everyday Kenyans are saying.
Because they're the ones who really understand how this stuff is being used.
Exactly. And don't forget the Kenyan crypto community has already shown a remarkable ability to self-regulate.
That's true. The article touched on that. Like, the market was already figuring things out while the government was still debating.
Right. So instead of assuming the government needs to step in and control everything, maybe they could actually learn from what's already happening.
Learn from the existing systems of trust and verification.
Exactly. Why reinvent the wheel?
It's almost like the government could be a partner in this whole thing, not just a rule enforcer.
Right. What if Kenya actually became known as a place where crypto businesses could thrive, where innovation is encouraged and supported?
That's a pretty exciting vision.
Mhm.
But let's be real for a second. There are legitimate concerns about money laundering and all that.
Of course, those concerns are valid. But that's where targeted, data-driven regulations come in.
Targeted. So not just throwing a blanket ban over the whole thing. Exactly. Use data and analysis to pinpoint the actual risks, then develop specific interventions to address them.
So you're saying use a scalpel, not a sledgehammer.
Precisely. And the beauty of this approach is that it can evolve.
Evolve how?
Well, as technology changes and new challenges emerge, regulations can adapt.
So it's like a constant feedback loop. Learning, adapting, and always striving to find that balance.
That's the heart of regulatory humility. Recognizing that we don't have all the answers.
Being willing to experiment.
And being flexible enough to change course when needed.
I really like that. It's a much more nuanced approach than we usually see with new technologies.
I agree. And I think it has the potential to create a much more vibrant and innovative crypto ecosystem.
One where Kenya could really be a leader. Okay, so we've talked about the problems and we've talked about the principles, but I'm still kind of fuzzy on what those specific steps towards regulatory humility would actually look like.
Yeah. It's all well and good to talk about concepts, but we need concrete action, right?
Exactly. So what would that action look like? Where do we even begin? Well, I think the first step is acknowledging that crypto is not a monolith,
Meaning,
meaning it's not just one thing. It's being used in so many different ways.
right, from sending money to family to these complex DeFi platforms.
Exactly. So regulation needs to be just as diverse as the ways crypto is being used.
So instead of trying to create this one-size-fits-all framework, you tailor the regulations to the specific use case.
Precisely. So for remittances, maybe you focus on transparency and consumer protection.
Makes sense. But for something like DeFi, you'd need a totally different approach.
Right, because the risks and challenges are different.
Okay, so that's step one. Get specific.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, another really important tool is something called a regulatory sandbox.
A sandbox, like for kids.
Kind of. It's a controlled environment where businesses can test out new crypto products and services.
Under the watchful eye of regulators.
Exactly. So it's a way to gather data, assess risks, and refine those regulations based on what actually happens.
So you're not just making rules in a vacuum.
Right. You're seeing how things work in the real world.
I can see how that would be super valuable. But even with sandboxes and tailored regulations, how do you make sure the voices of everyday Kenyans are heard?
That's where public consultation comes in. Big time.
Like town hall meetings and stuff?
That's one way. But you can also have online forums, commission studies. There are a lot of options.
The point is to get people talking.
Exactly. Let the government hear directly from the people who are actually using crypto.
Because their insights are invaluable.
Totally. They can tell you what's working, what's not, and what they need from regulators.
Okay, I'm liking this collaborative approach. But how do you ensure that the government actually listens?
That's a great question. And it all comes down to transparency and accountability.
So the government needs to be clear about how they're using that feedback.
And they need to be open about the decision-making process.
It can't just be lip service.
Right. It has to be a genuine back and forth.
So it's about building trust, showing people that their voices matter.
Exactly. And remember, Kenya already has a pretty active civil society.
So they're used to holding their leaders accountable.
Exactly. So there's a good foundation there.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. But I know some people are still going to be worried about the potential for criminal activity.
Oh, of course. That's always a concern. But here's the thing. We can use technology to address those concerns.
You mean like using blockchain analytics to track transactions?
Exactly. Make it harder for criminals to hide.
So instead of just trying to ban crypto, you make it safer.
Precisely. And again, that aligns with this idea of regulatory humility.
Being proactive,
Not
reactive.
exactly. It's about recognizing that this is a constantly evolving landscape.
And the best way to manage risk is to be flexible, adaptable, and innovative.
I think you nailed it.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating conversation.
It has. We've gone from the streets of Nairobi all the way to the global stage.
We've talked about the challenges, the opportunities, and what it means to approach this whole thing with regulatory humility.
And I think the big takeaway is that Kenya has a real chance to be a leader in this space.
A leader that shows the world how to embrace innovation while still protecting people.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So to all our deep divers out there, keep your eyes on Kenya. This is a story that's just getting started, and we'll be here to explore every twist and turn along the way. Until next time, stay curious.